What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Tomatolito Show. And we're just a few days removed from what was a really, really good fight between two great fighters in the welterweight division. Terence Crawford retained his WBO title and was successful in defeating and stopping Shawn Porter. A lot of hype went into this fight. One thing's for sure, just like I introduced it, it was a good fight. You start seeing the headlines out there by people posting their and clickbait type headlines of legendary fight between two legendary fighters, classic fight, instant classic, mega fight. It is what it is, right? It's a big draw because they're both big names, but no need to take that far of a leap, right? It was a good fight. This is not a Barrera Morales or a Pacquiao Morales, Pacquiao Marquez, Hagler Leonard, or Hagler Hearns for that matter. It was a good fight between two great fighters who have been around the sport for a number of years and have maintained their status amongst the best in that division. Of course, Terence Crawford was the undisputed champ at 140. When he moved up, he did to welterweight, did not take his foot off the gas, got his hands around the WBO title and has not relinquished it since. He remains undefeated and he looked good while doing it. Although, as expected, Shawn Porter gave him trouble. Shawn Porter is the type of fighter, and why he's a great fighter in my book and not just a good fighter. He's definitely amongst the top fighters in the welterweight division and has been for quite some time. Every single person that steps into that ring against Shawn Porter, across from Shawn Porter, is bound to have a tough night. You've seen it against Keith Thurman. You saw it against Yordenis Ugas, even Errol Spence. You could watch film on Shawn Porter. You kind of have an idea of what it is that you're going to be expecting and coming across when in the ring with Shawn Porter. But his height, his speed, the fact that he's able to close the gap quite quickly, most fighters end up saying the same thing. He's faster than he looks. His angles are really odd compared to what you see on film. And that's something that we've heard numerous fighters that are retired now mention, that when they start describing certain things about specific fighters that they faced, how the fighter used to hide their punch with the shoulder, how the angle, how they veer off, how they weren't able to read or gauge the distance quite well, and it wasn't as easy or as evident as in person as it was while watching film on said fighters. So this is what happened to Terence Crawford. Obviously, I'm sure the team saw some film on Shawn Porter, whether Terence did or not, but he figures it out. Terence Crawford, one thing that is great about him is the fact that he's able to process and analyze. Or I guess I said that backwards. He analyzes and processes while he's in the ring. Most fighters, great fighters, when they get into that great and elite level, they're able to do that. Good fighters are starting to cross into that threshold, but the rest are usually just reactionary. It's either proactive or reactive. What you're commonly seeing in the ring now. They prepare, they look good, they're in shape, they make weight, and then they get in there and it's just, let's just take it as it comes. And there's those special fighters that are able to process, they're able to analyze and process as it's happening. Terence Crawford struggled a little bit. Some people may hate me for saying that, but you could see it in his face. He was frustrated. And two things happened, several different details that presented themselves that I was able to catch on. I'm sure you did too. During the fight, Shawn Porter was actually ahead. And this is one of the fights that I really wanted to score because I knew it was going to be a little more technical than your traditional fight. Shawn Porter was ahead on my card as well, going into the 6th round. And that round, we ended up seeing Terence Crawford just come out hungry. He just hunted Shawn Porter, missed a lot. He threw a lot of punches at Porter from the moment that they left the stool and missed a lot. It was almost like a sign of desperation of trying to switch momentum to his favor. He recognized something, that it was starting to go stagnant, and a fight that's stagnant favors Porter because he does that in and out so well. He attacks in, tucks his head, throws wild punches, lands whatever could land, and then retrieves, makes the other fighter looks bad, and that's what Shawn Porter's been able to do his entire career. That's the threat and the problem that he posed for every fighter that he faced, including the better opposition in that division. The ones that were able to figure him out, like Ugas, like Errol Spence, They managed to do so and outpoint him. Kell Brook is another one. They managed to outpoint him and box him and use their strategy and impose their strategy on Shawn Porter, not allowing him to disrupt their game plan. And those sort of fighters have found success against Shawn Porter. Keith Thurman I didn't mention because that was a phone booth type fight. They were just brawling. They did affect several rounds where they tried to box each other, but it was just power punch after power punch after power punch. And it was that close where Keith Thurman ends up getting the nod over Porter, but it was that close where you could have given it to Porter and not been angry about it. Nonetheless, he had never been stopped. Crawford, again, does something that nobody else was able to do. He stopped Shawn Porter. He dropped him in the 10th round. Shawn Porter was a little bit off balance. If you look at that knockdown, he lunged forward. His right foot ends up following lead, and both feet end up in front of his body. So he's off balance now. And that combination with receiving a left-handed uppercut and the power behind that uppercut when Crawford threw it set Porter on his ass. And that was the first knockdown. He starts punching the canvas. Shawn Porter was upset that he got caught, upset that he got dropped because he felt like he was doing so good. And he was. I'll give you my scorecard, how I had it. I haven't had a chance to see the official scorecards. I don't know how far off I am. This is how I had it. I had round 1, round 4, round 5, round 6 for Shawn Porter. So 4 rounds for Shawn Porter. I had round 2, 3, 7, 8, and 9 for Crawford. And then, of course, the stoppage came in the 10th. He started putting it together that after that 6th round, even though he came out really strong, Shawn Porter, in my eyes, still took that round. And then round 7, he just started picking him apart. Round 8 was the most evident to me, where Terence Crawford maintained his wide stance, his wide approach, veered off to the side, and continued to utilize his hook as a deterrent. And if you watch the fight, he continuously throws that right hook, something that most fighters will utilize a jab to keep their spacing. He continuously throws a right hook and sometimes doubles up on that right hook as his defense mechanism, not so much, and utilizing it as a counter rather than an offensive. Just constantly threatening him and throwing it with power, constantly just telling him, you're going to get caught, you're going to get caught, you're going to get caught. And rather than a jab of keep your spacing and pushing him off, keeping him at bay, he utilizes that hook as his space, his spacer, I guess, to gain his space, to gain his ground. It's very different. It's very tricky. It's his go-to move, and he's very effective when doing it. From there, the 10th round, when he landed that uppercut, you immediately felt the shift in momentum. One of the details of the many details that I've been mentioning that I picked up on the fight was the 9th round, where he was in disbelief. Terence Crawford he's in disbelief that he's down. And his corner's conveying to him that he's possibly down on points. And he looks at him in disbelief, like, what fight are you guys watching? He felt like he was in the lead the whole time because he's that zoned in. He's that focused into the fight, as most fighters would be, not realizing what's actually happening or seeing it from the outside, knowing that it's an opinion-based sport and an opinion-based scoring that we have to deal with. And it was getting into the later rounds, getting into those championship rounds, late in the fight, and the corner tells him. And he basically closed the show, which leads you to believe that if they would have told him this earlier, could he have stopped Porter earlier in the fight? It looked like he tried to. He caught Porter with some really good punches. He had some really good moments, but Porter was also hurting Crawford. And it was uncomfortable for Crawford in numerous rounds where he smiled at Porter as if, you caught me. You caught me. He would nod his head. He was getting caught. It was evident. You heard the crowd every time he was getting caught, the oohs and the ahs, because Porter was effective in disrupting Crawford's strategy and plan. And that's been his career. That's how he amassed such a great career and how he found so much success throughout his career. It was because of his style of fight. It's an unconventional, disruptive style that Porter, the type of threat that Porter presents when stepping into the ring. And it's worked for the majority of his career, with the exception of those that were able to manage and deal with it. So it was a good fight. All in all, really good fight. Terence Crawford ends up coming with the second knockdown after Porter stands up. He looks at his corner as if, I got this, I'm good, I'm not hurt. He got in and he didn't look too wobbly, too hurt, too fazed by it, but he came in and again, he ducks his head. He immediately went into invading Crawford's space. Crawford maintained his wide stance, veered off to the right, and picked him apart with that right hook again, landing on Porter's ear, ends up getting him off balance. That was the big punch that hurt Porter on that second succession, and then missed a couple punches. Porter ended up landing both of his overhands, and not clean, but he definitely graced Crawford both the right and left overhand in that final exchange. But Crawford, because he was veered off, was grazed rather than hit cleanly, managed to sneak his left hook in there right on the ear and on the upper portion of the jawline, gets Porter off balance, and then follows it with his left hand and puts Porter down a second time. By that time, Kenny Porter, head trainer and father of Shawn Porter, is asking for the towel. He steps up to the apron and calls the fight. Porter, as upset as he was, he maintained composed, knowing that he had lost the fight. This is one that he really wanted, and it didn't go his way. Bud Crawford, again, showed why he's an elite level fighter. He's definitely, I guess because of he's got a clean resume. He's got a clean body of work. He managed to become the undisputed at 140, and he's been holding his own here at 147. He's not suffering what other fighters are suffering as far as level of opposition. He manages to get the best opposition available, opposition that he often makes look easy, but it was an issue of promotional disputes. It was an issue of Top Rank not being able to work with other promoters for the majority of Crawford's career, and not being able to get him those big name fights like the Pacquiaos, like the Thurmans. But it started to work now. He managed to get Porter. He's been in with some really good opposition that give trouble to anybody else, like Mean Machine, who Virgil Ortiz just defeated. Virgil Ortiz continues to call out Crawford. I don't think he's there yet. But Crawford definitely, with this win, he maintains And however it is that you see him, whether he's number 1 or number 2 in the welterweight division, that's another topic that we could briefly touch on, because something that continues to occur is the recency bias. The fight that we just finished watching is who you deem to be the best. And especially if it's an entertaining fight like the one that we just had here, people tend to go, Crawford's the best in the world, hands down, and forgetting about them just saying that. Whether it's commentators, and this one I'm directing towards the commentators, ESPN commentators, the recency bias was brought up, and the claim of them not being guilty of it, of applying it, claiming that Crawford is the best in the world at what he does. But a couple weeks removed from when they were saying the same thing about Canelo Alvarez, who just became undisputed. A month removed from when people were saying that about Usyk and Tyson Fury. And they throw this so easy out there, these claims of the best fighter in the world. Or are they just the best fighter in their division? But a pound for pound best, the body of work has to be there. I'm not saying Crawford doesn't belong up there, but unfortunately, you got Canelo, who just accomplished one of the major feats in less than a year's time. He managed to get the remaining 3 titles to unify the entire division at super middleweight. He's got an impeccable career, an impeccable resume, an impeccable body of work. You got Tyson Fury that managed to upset and stop Deontay Wilder again, the only man to have done that to Deontay Wilder, and he's done it twice. Arguably the best heavyweight right now. And then you got Usyk, who just dethroned Anthony Joshua. You got Errol Spence last year when he came back after the accident, and people are saying that he's the best. So that term of recency bias is very real. And you got to be very careful about it, because it is subjective. But you got to analyze the overall picture. We're not that far removed from when people were saying that Triple G was the best middleweight ever, possibly the best fighter around. What about Inoue? The monster is a threat, and the same crew will say that he's hands down the best fighter in the world whenever they see him fight. So how do you have Bud Crawford? In the welterweight division alone, interchangeably, if you say Bud Crawford is number 1 and Spence 2, I would agree with you. If you have it the other way around, I would also agree with you. I couldn't argue with that. I think Spence has a little bit better resume, but he's also with a stable and a promotional company that has a majority of fighters available in that division. And he was about to get Manny Pacquiao if it wasn't for that eye injury. Terence Crawford has been asking for the big fights and hasn't gotten them. So he gets the next best opposition that's out there, or the so-called boogeymen that people are refusing to fight, that people have an eye on, but they're refusing to fight. And he makes it look easy. Regardless of how you feel about Jeff Horn's defeat over Manny Pacquiao, which in my opinion was rigged out in Australia, and I didn't think Jeff Horn did enough to win. Nonetheless, they gave him the decision. He ended up with a title, and he got himself into a title fight with Terence Crawford. And Terence Crawford has said that was a tough opponent. Mean Machine. I mean, you continue to look at his resume. Thomas Delorme, Gamboa. At the time when Crawford has faced them, he's answered the call and he's passed the test with the absolute best opposition that's out there. And these are fighters that are so-called boogeymen and tough fighters in that division. This is very different than what's Demetrius Andrade, what he's experiencing, where he's fighting C and D level fighters because the division is that weak and he's unable to get opponents. He's high risk, low reward, even though he's a champion in that division. We'll talk about Andre on a different episode, and we'll cover the landscape of the 160. Terence Crawford cements himself as the top welterweight, either 1 or 2, however you feel about that. But in my eyes right now, if we're going to look at the recent performances, look at what he just did between what Spence just did in his last fight and what Crawford just managed to do to a very good Shawn Porter. Not a faded version of him, not an old version of him, a very good Shawn Porter. Great Shawn Porter at that, because he executed his game plan like he wanted to, but fell short. He got caught. But it's the same Shawn Porter that fought Errol Spence and posed the same problems. Crawford just dealt with it differently. And he managed to stop. The only man to stop Shawn Porter in his entire career. Something else that popped up. The fight is stopped. Kenny Porter ends up saying that he knew, he stopped it. He saw the momentum shift. He didn't want his son to get hurt. And then he added, Shawn Porter didn't prepare like he should have. We knew it. He said it in interviews leading to the fight, that there was some flaws that occurred during the camp, that he wasn't as satisfied with the camp overall as he has been in the past. He mentioned it again and just outed Shawn Porter. Maybe it was a little harsh, because I thought Shawn Porter performed great and he was ahead in the cards until he started getting picked apart and Crawford executed his game plan better. For you to consider Crawford to be pound for pound one of the best in the world, this is the type of stuff that a pound for pound best in the world fighter would do. Adjust, overcome, and defeat. Shawn Porter was bested by Crawford. At the conclusion of the fight, another detail that popped up is that Errol Spence was witnessing the fight. He was there live. As soon as the fight got called, Spence stands up, the cameras pan over to him. He gets up from his seat along with his team, and they walk out. And one final detail was at the conclusion of the fight, or two, I guess, at the post-fight press conference, Shawn Porter calls it a day. He hangs the gloves up for good. He said this is something that he wanted to do after his fight with Errol Spence. It was something that was in his mind already. Of course, he's become a very, very good, detailed commentator for Fox Sports, and anywhere else that he goes, he's very good at that job, and he's going to continue that career after boxing. So very, very good for him. He pulls the plug. He hangs the gloves up. He called it a career. And he says it's not because Crawford retired him. It's something that he wanted to do already. And he saw this as the moment to do it. And the final detail was on the Crawford side. Crawford basically announced himself as a free agent while sitting next to Bob Arum. He's no longer going to wait for Bob Arum to seek fights for him. He's going to go out and get it. He managed to fight a PBC fighter on ESPN. Bob Arum made this happen. Crawford no longer wants to work with Bob Arum and basically declared his independence and his free agency while sitting next to Bob Arum, who had no comment, just listened and watched as he stared into the press, or towards the press. So a lot of little details that occurred pre, during, and post. Hopefully I covered most of it. And one last thing, what's the state of the welterweight division? We got Ugas, who dethroned Manny Pacquiao, who ended up retiring after that fight, just days after that fight. Ugas has champion in the welterweight division for the WBA. The regular champion, he used to be the regular champion. That whole debacle with the WBA happened when Manny Pacquiao was listed as the champion in recess. He asked to be reinstated as the champion, to which the WBA did not oblige. The WBA ended up restructuring, and now they announced that they're restructuring the entire WBA organization and how they go about issuing titles for every single division that's been affected, with the multitude of titles that they issue out and that they assign. So now that they're in the restructuring process, they denied Manny Pacquiao in his request of being reinstated. They ended up making that basically a champion in recess against a regular champion. And it was kind of like a organizational unification when Ugas and Pacquiao faced, so we could find out who the real champ was for the WBA. Ugas ended up coming out successful. The interim title, or the interim title holder, was Jamal James. He ended up getting raised to the regular champion of the WBA, and they created a round robin style, 2 semifinals between Butayev and Jamal James, and Stanionis and Ugas. So those two have been ordered to a purse bid that will take place in December, early part of December, so they could figure out when they're going to fight. The first portion of the round robin was already solved a couple weeks back, and that was between Butayev, who outpointed, outclassed, outpowered Jamal James, and subsequently ended up stopping Jamal James and lifted that version of the WBA title from James. So he's out of the picture for now. James is. That's a fighter who previously lost to Ugas as well. So Butayev, the young prospects, similar to Stanionis, they're in similar stages of their career. They're power hitters with decent boxing and a lot of good chin and a lot of fortitude, I guess. They push forward, a lot of pressure. They're pressure style fighters with good boxing on their side and power to back up that style of fight. Similar fighters, Butayev and Stanionis. And Stanionis dethroned Thomas Delorme earlier this year. I believe it was in April. And then he ended up getting in the ring with Luis Collazo in what was supposed to be a crossroads fight for Luis Collazo on a personal side, whether he remained active and seeking a big title shot, or if he was going to retire that night against Stanionis. The fight only lasted 4 rounds. It ended in controversy and an accidental headbutt, and at the conclusion of the fight, Luis Collazo decided to pull the plug and just walk away. Stanionis was definitely getting the best of Collazo and beating him to the punch. And I saw that if the fight would have continued, then Stanionis was going to stop Collazo maybe around the seventh round, 6th or 7th round. He would have knocked him out. Stanionis was looking really, really good. Butayev looked really good against Jamal James. And as the co-main event of that Jamal James-Butayev card, which is a Showtime card a couple weeks back, I think it was October 30th. So yeah, 2-3 weeks ago, the co-main event was Jaron Boots Ennis. And Boots is a fighter that a lot of people talk about. A lot of people continue to mention his name. He's becoming more and more famous, I guess, or at least he's starting to gain, his name's gaining more traction, and more people are starting to be aware of him. He's a solid, well-rounded fighter with really high boxing pedigree and good power to back up his punches. He defeated Thomas Delorme. So Delorme loses to Stanionis earlier in the year, and now he loses to Jaron Ennis. Look at the landscape, the way it's starting to build right now. Within the welterweight division, you have WBO champ Terence Crawford. You have IBF and WBC champ in Errol Spence. You have the WBA trying to figure out who's going to represent them between Ugas Stanionis is the fight that's at hand, and Butayev just beat his he just did his job to get himself into a title shot, whether it'll be, it's going to be the winner of Staniones and Ugas. So we'll see when that fight's going to happen once that purse bet is solved. But you got Butayev moving in, Staniones moving in, Jamal James could be a threat to anybody. He would drop down to that B-level fighter in the welterweight division. You got Virgil Ortiz coming up. You still have Mean Machine out there who could pose threats to anybody. Keith Thurman, who's been inactive, but we should be expecting to see him sometime in 2022. So the landscape in the welterweight division is in a good spot. You got Josh Taylor looking to move up, the undisputed champ at 140, looking to move up to challenge Terence Crawford. But that same night that Boots ended up knocking out Delorme on the first round in an impressive knockout. If you haven't seen it, go check that out. You could find it on YouTube, and they show the knockout there in a highlight post. That same night, ESPN was airing their version, their card, and it was Jose Cepeda versus Josue Vargas out of Puerto Rico. A young kid, very brash, very vocal, just ran his mouth, and Cepeda stops him in the first round. Just dropped him, mangled him, and just taught a lesson to the young kid from Puerto Rico. Jose Cepeda, Chon Cepeda is up there. If you don't remember who he is, he got Fight of the Year last year. His fight against Ivan Baranchik, he has a loss to Jose Ramirez. Jose Ramirez, of course, the man who was seeking to unify the division against Josh Taylor, and Josh Taylor came out victorious in that fight. So that's the Cepeda that just had an incredible knockout and an incredible stoppage win over Josue Vargas. So he should be right there ready to challenge Josh Taylor. So you got all this movement happening. Maurice Hooker, who just moved up to 147 from 140, he had a great fight against Virgil Ortiz earlier this year. The landscape in the welterweight division, there's a lot of contenders and a lot of talent moving up, ready to assume the throne or challenge for a title. These guys are going to be busy. Terence Crawford is starting to look at 154 and try to get himself up there. So we don't know how it's all going to play out, but the landscape in the welterweight division is in a good spot right now, and it's pretty exciting. It's in an exciting spot right now because there's a lot of movement and a lot of moving parts taking place. Of course, what do we want to see? Errol Spence and Terence Crawford. That's the ultimate fight for, regardless of what the WBA has going on. That fight between Spence and Crawford would unify the division, even if it's unofficial. It would unify the division. These are the absolute two best fighters, and we hope we get to see them hopefully 2022 if the powers that be are able to make this fight happen and come to fruition, and we don't have another scenario of a Mayweather-Pacquiao when it happens 5 or 6 or 7 years too late. Definitely 3 or 4 years too late from what I recall. By the time it took place in 2013 or 2014, whenever it was that fight happened, it was definitely several years removed from when it should have happened. Great night of boxing overall. I'm gonna do another follow-up episode covering all the undercards, the recent undercards that we've had. The fights that have taken place on the undercards of all these past few weeks, the events, because there's been a lot of fights on these undercards that have had big implications within their own divisions, both on the male and female side. So I'm going to do an episode just dedicated to that so we could play catch up with that and everything that's happened, including there was an interesting fight that took place that caught my eye, and the one that I was interested in, the undercard fight between Dogbe and Diaz. That's a 126 pound fight. And so these fights have implications within their own divisions, and it's interesting to dive into that. So I'll leave you guys with that. Really, really good fight between two great fighters. We lost one in Shawn Porter since he's going to be retiring, and Terence Crawford. It'll be interesting to see what he's going to do, if he's going to hang around and wait for Errol Spence, if he's going to wait to see what happens with the WBA. Maybe he could unify there, and then force a fight against Errol Spence at that point, each bringing 2 titles to the table, should he be successful against Ugas or Staniones or Butayev, whoever comes out the winner of that. Sky's the limit for Terence Crawford. I mean, holy crap, he doesn't disappoint. He figures out, as uncomfortable as he was during the fight, as frustrated as he was during the fight, he finds a way. He finds a way and he makes it look good. And he makes it look easy, almost like he could have done it at any point. By the time he stopped Porter, you've come to think like, man, was he just playing around the first 9 rounds? If he did it that easy, he made it look so easy, raises the question whether he could have done it earlier or not. So got plenty more episodes coming your way. Thank you guys again for tuning in each episode. And thank you for all the support. Check you guys out soon. Talk to you soon. Take care. Have a good one.